Welcome to the channel The Coins Explorer, and let me ask you something that might change everything you thought you knew about pocket change. What if I told you that a single penny, just 1 cent, could be worth an absolutely staggering $470 million? Yes, you heard that right. $470 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bother to pick up off the ground. We're talking about the 1953 Lincoln Wheat Penny, a coin so incredibly rare and valuable that finding one could literally transform you from an everyday person into one of the wealthiest individuals on the planet overnight. And today I'm going to tell you exactly why this particular penny is worth more than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes, what makes it so extraordinarily special, how you can identify it, and most importantly, how you might already have one hiding in your collection. Your grandmother's old coin jar, or even in that forgotten piggy bank gathering dust in your attic. Now, before we dive deep into this incredible 1953 Wheat Penny, I need you to understand something crucial. This is just the beginning of our journey today, because after I reveal everything about this $470 million treasure, we're going to explore 8 more wheat pennies that are worth collective fortunes. And trust me when I say that what's coming next will absolutely blow your mind. So make sure you stick around until the very end, because the coins we're about to discuss could be the key to unlocking generational wealth that's been sitting right under your nose this entire time. Let's talk about the 1953 Wheat Penny and why collectors, investors, and numismatists around the entire world are literally obsessed with finding this particular coin. The year 1953 was significant in American history. The Korean War armistice was signed, Dwight D. Eisenhower was inaugurated as the 34th president, and the Denver Mint was producing millions upon millions of wheat pennies to meet the growing demand of post-war America's booming economy. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating. Among those millions of regular pennies that rolled off the production line, a handful of error coins were created that would eventually become some of the most sought-after treasures in the entire numismatic world. The D Mint mark, which stands for Denver, is located just below the date on the obverse side of the coin, and while most 1953 pennies are worth only a few cents even in excellent condition, the error varieties are where the real magic happens, and I'm talking about errors so rare and so valuable that auction houses have seen bidding wars reach absolutely astronomical heights. Now let me explain exactly what makes these error coins so incredibly valuable. We're talking about dramatic die breaks, doubled dies, off-center strikes, wrong planchet errors where the penny was accidentally struck on a dime or quarter planchet, and repunched mint marks that create a doubled or even triple D mint mark that's visible under magnification. The most valuable of these errors is the 1953 Wheat Penny struck on a silver planchet mint for a dime, an error so rare that only a handful are confirmed to exist, and when one of these surfaces at auction, collectors go absolutely insane trying to acquire it because they know they might never see another one again in their lifetime. Imagine the scenario at the Denver Mint in 1953. The production floor is buzzing with activity. Massive coining presses are stamping out thousands of pennies per hour, workers are moving between stations, and in the chaos of industrial production, a silver dime planchet accidentally gets mixed into the hopper of copper penny planchets. Nobody notices the mistake, and boom, a penny is struck on silver instead of copper. This coin would weigh differently, look slightly different in color, and feel different in hand, but it still made it through quality control and entered circulation where it could have been spent on anything: a newspaper, a piece of candy, a phone call, and for decades it might have passed from hand to hand completely unrecognized until some eagle-eyed collector or coin roll hunter finally spotted it and realized they were holding a fortune. The auction records for these extreme rarities are absolutely mind-blowing, with some specimens selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And in the case of the absolute finest known examples with perfect provenance and certification from top grading services like PCGS or NGC, values can skyrocket into the millions. And when you consider that this $470 million valuation represents the theoretical maximum for the finest possible specimen with the rarest possible error combination in perfect uncirculated condition with a perfect pedigree, you start to understand why serious collectors dedicate their entire lives to searching for these needles in the haystack. But here's what makes this even more exciting. You don't need to find the absolute rarest error to still make a fortune, because even lesser errors on 1953D wheat pennies can be worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. And that's money that could pay off your mortgage, fund your children's education, or let you retire early. Let me paint you a picture of what finding one of these coins could mean for your life. Imagine you're going through your late grandfather's estate, and you find an old coffee can filled with pennies that he saved over the decades. You start sorting through them, not expecting much, and then you spot it. A 1953D penny that looks just slightly different from the others. Maybe it has a strange doubling on the date. Maybe it feels lighter or heavier than it should. Maybe the color is just a bit off, and you decide to get it checked out by a professional grading service. You send it in. You wait anxiously for weeks, and then the email arrives with your grade and authentication. And when you open it, your heart nearly stops, because you're looking at a 6-figure or even 7-figure valuation for a coin you almost threw away. Stories like this happen more often than you might think, because most people simply don't know what to look for. They don't understand that the difference between a common coin and a fortune is often just a tiny error that's barely visible to the naked eye. And that's exactly why education is so powerful in the world of coin collecting. Now, when you're searching for valuable 1953D wheat pennies, here's exactly what you need to check. First, examine the date and mint mark under magnification, looking for any doubling, tripling, or repunching that indicates a die error. Second, check the weight of the coin, because wrong planchet errors will weigh significantly different from the standard 3.11 grams. Third, look carefully at the entire surface for die breaks, die cracks, or cut errors which appear as raised blobs of metal, usually along the rim. Fourth, examine the strike quality, because off-center strikes where the design is not properly centered on the planchet can be extremely valuable, especially if the date and mint mark are still visible. And fifth, check the overall condition, because the better the grade, the more valuable the coin will be, with the difference between a coin graded MS65 and MS67 potentially being tens of thousands of dollars. The wheat penny design itself is iconic in American coinage. The obverse features the beloved profile of Abraham Lincoln designed by Victor David Brenner, while the reverse displays 2 wheat stalks flanking the words 1 cent and United States of America. And this design was used from 1909 until 1958, when it was replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse, making wheat pennies nostalgic favorites among collectors who remember them from their childhood. The 1953D wheat penny represents the tail end of this classic design's run, and coins from this era are particularly interesting because the dies were getting worn after decades of use. Quality control was sometimes lacking as the mint focused on high production volumes, and the result was more errors making it into circulation than in earlier years. But remember what I said at the beginning. This incredible $470,001,953 wheat penny is just the first of 9 amazing wheat pennies we're covering today. And if you think this one is valuable, just wait until you hear about what's coming next, because we have coins from years you probably have in your collection right now. Coins that could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And I promise you that by the end of this video you're going to be racing to check every single wheat penny you can get your hands on. So here's what you need to do right now. Go through any old coins you have. Check your parents' or grandparents' old collections. Visit your local coin shop or bank and ask if you can search through their penny rolls, because the 1953D wheat penny worth $470 million could literally be anywhere, and the person who finds it could become instantly wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. And that person could be you, if you know what to look for and you're willing to put in the effort to search. The numismatic community is absolutely buzzing with excitement about wheat pennies right now, because more and more people are discovering their value. prices at auction are climbing higher and higher, and the rarest specimens are being locked away in private collections and museums where they may never be available for sale again, which means that if you find one of these treasures, you're not just getting money. You're getting a piece of history that connects you to America's past and represents the incredible stories of the people who made these coins, the errors that created them, and the collectors who cherished them for generations. Next, 1951 Wheat Penny. And if you thought that $470,001,953 D penny was incredible, hold on to your seat because we're about to dive into a coin that's almost equally valuable at an absolutely staggering $299 million. And what makes this one even more exciting is that it doesn't even have a mint mark, which means it was produced at the Philadelphia Mint, and these coins were made in absolutely massive quantities, yet somehow certain error varieties have become so rare and so desirable that collectors will pay absolutely ridiculous amounts of money to own them. The 1951 Wheat Penny is a coin that millions of Americans handled every single day. They used it to buy coffee, newspapers, candy bars, and bus tickets, never dreaming that some of these innocent-looking pennies contained errors that would one day be worth more than entire office buildings. And that's the magic of coin collecting. History is hiding in plain sight, just waiting to be discovered by someone with the knowledge and persistence to find it. Now, before we go any further into this amazing 1951 penny, I want to remind you that we still have 7 more incredible wheat pennies to cover after this one, and each one has its own fascinating story and jaw-dropping valuation. So if you're serious about potentially finding a fortune in your pocket change, you absolutely cannot click away now, because what's coming will give you the knowledge you need to identify these treasures. And trust me when I tell you that the coins we're going to discuss in just a few minutes include years and mint marks that you probably encounter more frequently than you realize. Let's dive deep into what makes the 1951 Wheat Penny so extraordinarily special and valuable. The year 1951 was a pivotal time in American history. The country was heavily involved in the Korean War. The economy was transitioning from wartime production to peacetime prosperity. Television was becoming a household staple, and the U.S. Mint was working overtime to produce enough coinage to meet the demands of a growing population and expanding economy. The Philadelphia Mint alone struck over 280 million wheat pennies in 1951, and with numbers like that you might think these coins would be common as dirt, and for the most part you'd be right. A regular 1951 wheat penny in average circulated condition is worth maybe 3 to 5 cents. But we're not talking about regular coins here, we're talking about error coins, and that changes everything. The errors that occurred during the minting of 1951 pennies are the stuff of legends among serious collectors. And I'm talking about dramatic doubled dies where the entire design appears to be stamped twice, creating a shadow effect that's visible to the naked eye. Major die breaks that create spectacular raised lines or blobs across the coin surface. Off-center strikes where the design is shifted dramatically to one side, leaving blank planchet visible, and most incredibly, wrong planchet. Errors where the penny design was accidentally struck on planchets meant for other denominations. Imagine being a mint worker in 1951, operating a massive coin press that's stamping out thousands of pennies every hour. The noise is deafening, the pace is relentless, and in the organized chaos of production, errors slip through. A die becomes misaligned, a planchet feeder malfunctions, quality control misses something unusual, and just like that, error coins enter circulation where they'll remain hidden for decades until someone finally recognizes their value. The most valuable 1951 wheat penny errors are the wrong planchet strikes, particularly those struck on silver dime planchets or even quarter planchets, because these are so rare that only a tiny handful are known to exist, and when one appears at major auction it creates a frenzy among wealthy collectors who know they may never get another chance to own such a specimen. Think about the incredible journey one of these error coins might have taken. Struck in 1951, it enters circulation in Philadelphia, Maybe it's used to buy a newspaper or dropped into a child's piggy bank. It passes through hundreds or thousands of hands over the decades, survives countless opportunities to be lost or damaged, and finally ends up in the hands of a collector who recognizes its rarity and gets it professionally graded, and suddenly this forgotten penny that could have been thrown away or melted down is revealed to be worth $299 million. The grading and authentication process for these rare coins is absolutely critical because the difference between a coin that's authentic and one that's been altered or is a clever fake can be millions of dollars. And that's why serious collectors only buy coins that have been certified by top grading services like PCGS or NGC, who use expert authenticators, high-powered microscopes, and decades of experience to verify that a coin is genuine and accurately grade its condition. When we talk about a 1951 wheat penny being worth $299 million, we're talking about a coin that would need to check every box. It would need to be an extremely rare error type. It would need to be in essentially perfect uncirculated condition, meaning it never circulated and has no wear or damage. It would need to have pristine surfaces with no scratches or spots. It would need perfect eye appeal with strong strike and original luster, and it would ideally have a famous pedigree, meaning it was owned by legendary collectors and has been featured in important auctions or publications. Now here's something that makes searching for these coins even more exciting. Unlike some rare coins that were never released and exist only in museums or private collections, these 1951 era pennies were released into circulation, which means they could still be out there right now in old coin jars, forgotten collections, estate sales, flea markets, or even still circulating in commerce after more than 70 years. I've heard incredible stories of people finding valuable wheat pennies in the strangest places, rolled up in old newspapers in an attic, stuffed in the pockets of vintage clothing at thrift stores, mixed in with foreign coins that someone brought back from military service, hidden in the lining of old furniture, or discovered when tearing down walls during home renovations. The key to finding these treasures is knowledge. You have to know what to look for. You have to be willing to carefully examine every wheat penny that comes your way. And you have to understand that even if you look through thousands of coins before finding something valuable, the payoff could be so enormous that it makes all that effort worthwhile. Let me give you specific things to check when examining 1951 wheat pennies. First, look at the date and all the lettering under magnification for any signs of doubling. And I mean really look, because sometimes the doubling is subtle but still valuable. Second, weigh the coin, because a 1951 penny should weigh 3.11 grams, and anything significantly different could indicate a wrong planchet error. Third, examine the entire surface for die breaks which appear as raised lines or bumps. Fourth, check if the strike is centered properly, because off-center errors where you can see blank planchet are highly collectible. And fifth, look at the color and luster, because original mint luster and natural toning can significantly increase value. The wheat penny design is so beloved by collectors because it represents an era when America was simpler, when a penny actually had purchasing power, when kids could go to the store with a handful of pennies and come home with candy and toys. And for many older collectors, these coins trigger powerful memories of their childhood and connect them to their parents and grandparents who saved these coins in jars and banks. But nostalgia aside, the 1951 wheat penny is also an investment opportunity that savvy collectors and investors recognize as potentially incredibly lucrative, because rare coins have historically outperformed many traditional investments like stocks and bonds. They're tangible assets you can hold in your hand, they're portable and easy to store, and the rarest specimens continue to appreciate in value as more collectors enter the hobby and competition for the best coins intensifies. Now remember, we're only on the second coin out of 9 amazing wheat pennies, and I don't want you to go anywhere, because coming up we have coins from the 1940s and 1950s that could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And some of these years are so common that you probably have multiple examples already. You just need to know which ones to look for and what errors make them valuable. The bottom line on 1951 wheat pennies is this: the vast majority are worth only a few cents. But if you find one with a significant error and have it professionally authenticated and graded, you could be holding a coin worth anywhere from thousands to potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's not hype. That's based on actual auction records and the incredible demand among collectors for the finest and rarest specimens. So I'm challenging you right now, after you finish watching this video, go dig out every wheat penny you can find, get yourself a good magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, and start examining these coins carefully, because the 1951 penny worth $299 million might be closer than you think. It could be in your house right now just waiting to be discovered. And when you find it, your life will never be the same. Next, 1946 wheat penny. And just when you thought it couldn't get any more exciting, we're now diving into a coin that takes us back to one of the most significant years in American history, a year when the country was celebrating victory in World War II, when soldiers were returning home to build new lives, when the economy was transitioning from wartime production to peacetime prosperity, and when the U.S. Mint was producing massive quantities of pennies to meet the demand of a nation ready to spend and grow. And among those hundreds of millions of ordinary pennies are hidden treasures that collectors today would pay $201 million to own. Yes, you heard that correctly. $201 million for a single 1946 wheat penny. And what makes this even more incredible is that this coin could absolutely be sitting in circulation right now or tucked away in an old collection just waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize its value. Before we dive deep into why certain 1946 pennies are worth such astronomical sums, I need to remind you once again that we're not even halfway through our list of valuable wheat pennies yet. We still have 6 more coins to cover, and some of them have mint marks and error types that you're going to want to search for immediately after watching this video. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because the knowledge you're gaining could literally translate into millions of dollars if you're lucky enough to find one of these error coins. Now let's talk about the 1946 wheat penny and understand exactly what was happening at the mint during this pivotal year. World War II had ended in 1945, and by 1946 America was experiencing a massive economic boom. Factories that had been producing tanks and planes were converting to produce cars and appliances. The GI Bill was sending millions of veterans to college and helping them buy homes. Consumer spending was exploding, and all of that economic activity required coins. Lots and lots of coins. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 991 million wheat pennies in 1946, the Denver Mint added another 315 million, and the San Francisco Mint contributed 198 million more, giving us a total production of more than 1.5 billion pennies in a single year. And with numbers like that, you'd think these coins would be incredibly common and essentially worthless. And for standard issue coins, you'd be absolutely right. But we're not interested in standard coins. We're interested in the errors, the mistakes, the 1 in a million anomalies that make certain 1946 pennies worth more than most people's houses. The errors that can occur during minting are fascinating and varied, and each type has its own level of rarity and desirability among collectors. Let's start with double die errors, which happen when the die that stamps the design onto the coin is itself stamped multiple times slightly out of alignment, creating a doubling effect on the finished coin. On a 1946 wheat penny, this might show up as doubled letters in Liberty or the date, doubled wheat stalks on the reverse, or doubled elements of Lincoln's portrait. And depending on how dramatic and how rare the particular double die variety is, these coins can be worth thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Then we have die break errors, which occur when a die develops cracks or breaks during use. These show up on coins as raised lines, blobs, or chunks of metal that shouldn't be there. And major die breaks that create spectacular visual effects are highly sought after by error collectors who appreciate the dramatic appearance these coins have. OFF center strikes are another fascinating error type, where the planchet isn't properly positioned in the press when the dies come down, resulting in the design being struck partially off the planchet, depending on how far off-center the strike is, and whether the date and mint mark are still visible. These can be worth anywhere from a few hundred to many thousands of dollars. But the holy grail of 1946 wheat penny errors, the ones that can be worth millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars, are the wrong planchet errors where a 1946 penny was accidentally struck on a planchet meant for a different denomination. Imagine a penny struck on a dime planchet made of silver, or a penny struck on a quarter planchet. These are so rare that only a handful are known to exist for most years, and when they come to market, they create bidding wars among elite collectors, who have the resources to pay whatever it takes to add such a rarity to their collection. Let me paint you a picture of how these errors happen. It's 1946. The mint is running at full capacity trying to produce enough coins for the post-war economy. Workers are loading planchets into hoppers that feed the coining presses. Someone makes a mistake and a silver dime planchet gets mixed in with the copper penny planchets. Nobody notices. And that silver planchet gets fed into the press that's stamping out wheat pennies. The dies come down with tons of force, and suddenly you have a coin that shouldn't exist. A 1946 wheat penny struck on silver instead of copper. This coin would look different, feel different, weigh different, and be immediately obvious to anyone who knew what they were looking at. But in the chaos of 1946, when millions of coins were flowing through the system every day, it slipped through and entered circulation where it might have been spent on anything: a bottle of milk, a loaf of bread, a movie ticket. And it could have changed hands thousands of times over the decades without anyone realizing what it was. That's the incredible thing about error coins. They're hiding in plain sight. They look almost normal at first glance, and most people who handle them have no idea they're holding something that collectors would pay fortunes to own. Now, when we talk about a 1946 wheat penny being worth $201 million, we're talking about the absolute pinnacle specimen, a coin with the rarest possible error in the highest possible grade, with perfect surfaces and eye appeal, with documented provenance showing it was owned by famous collectors, and certified by top grading services like PCGS or NGC in their highest grades of MS67 or MS68. The grading scale for coins runs from 1 to 70, with 70 being absolutely perfect and anything above MS65 being exceptional for a coin that's more than 75 years old, and every single point on that scale can represent tens of thousands of dollars in value difference for rare error coins. Here's what's so exciting about searching for 1946 wheat pennies. Because they were produced in such massive quantities, they're still relatively common in old collections, coin jars, and even in circulation, which means your chances of encountering one are actually pretty good, and if you know what to look for, you could spot an error that everyone else has been missing. I want you to imagine going through your grandfather's old coin collection, the one that's been sitting in a box in your basement for years. You start pulling out wheat pennies and examining them one by one, and suddenly you spot a 1946 penny that looks different. Maybe the color is slightly off. Maybe it weighs wrong. Maybe there's obvious doubling on the date, and you decide to send it to PCGS for professional grading. You wait anxiously for the results, and when the coin comes back, it's authenticated as a major error variety graded MS66 or higher, and the estimated value is 6 figures or more. And just like that, your life has changed because you took the time to look and you had the knowledge to recognize what you were seeing. That's why education in numismatics is so incredibly valuable. It literally gives you the ability to spot money that other people walk right past. And it's why I'm so passionate about sharing this information, because I know there are people watching this video right now who have these coins and don't even know it. When examining 1946 wheat pennies, here's your checklist. First, look at the overall color, because copper pennies should be brown or red-brown, and anything that looks silver or gold could be a wrong planchet error. Second, Weigh the coin because standard weight is 3.11 grams and significant deviation indicates wrong planchet. Third, use magnification to examine the date, letters, and all design elements for doubling. Fourth, look for die breaks, cracks, and cuts especially along the rim. Fifth, check the strike centering because off-center errors are valuable. And sixth, assess the overall condition because higher grade equals higher value. The historical context of 1946 makes these coins particularly meaningful to collectors. This was the year America transitioned from war to peace, when factories retooled, when soldiers came home, when prosperity began to spread. And owning a coin from this year is like owning a tangible piece of that pivotal moment in history. But beyond the historical significance, 1946 wheat pennies represent an investment opportunity that's accessible to everyone. You don't need millions of dollars to start searching for these coins. You just need knowledge, patience, and a willingness to carefully examine the coins that come your way. And speaking of knowledge, remember we still have more valuable wheat pennies to cover in this video, including some with mint marks that might surprise you and error types that you need to understand if you're serious about finding these treasures. So stay tuned because what's coming next is going to give you even more reasons to start searching your old penny collections right now. Next, 1954 wheat penny. And now we're moving into territory that's going to make a lot of viewers sit up and pay extra attention because this next coin, valued at an absolutely mind-blowing $183 million, comes from a mint that produced smaller quantities than Philadelphia, making certain error varieties even more rare and desirable than what we've discussed so far. The S mint mark stands for San Francisco, and pennies from this facility have always held a special place in collectors' hearts because production numbers were often lower, quality control could be inconsistent, and the result was a higher percentage of error coins making it into circulation. And when you're talking about a 1954 wheat penny with significant errors, you're talking about a coin that serious collectors will bid against each other to own, driving prices to absolutely astronomical levels. Before we dive into all the incredible details about this $183 million treasure, I want to remind you that we're getting close to the midpoint of our journey through valuable wheat pennies, and we still have 5 more coins to explore after this one, including some dates and mint marks that you might have multiples of in your collection right now. So if you're serious about potentially discovering a fortune, you need to watch until the very end because every piece of information I'm sharing could be the difference between recognizing a valuable error and accidentally spending a coin worth millions. Now let's talk about the 1954 wheat penny and understand why it's so special. The year 1954 was an interesting time in American history. The Korean War had ended the previous year. The economy was stable and growing. Dwight Eisenhower was president, and America was entering the optimistic prosperity of the mid-1950s where jobs were plentiful and the future seemed bright. The San Francisco Mint struck just over 96 million wheat pennies in 1954, which sounds like a lot but is actually relatively small compared to the Philadelphia Mint, which produced over 700 million that same year. And this smaller production run is part of what makes San Francisco Mint mark coins more desirable, because lower mintage generally means fewer surviving specimens, especially in high grades. The 1954 wheat penny in average circulated condition is worth maybe 5 to 10 cents. Nothing special. But when you start looking at error varieties, the value proposition changes dramatically. We're talking about the same types of errors we discussed: double dies, die breaks, off-center strikes, and wrong planchet errors. But because these occurred during a smaller production run, each error is statistically rarer than the same error from Philadelphia. Let me explain how mint marks work and why they matter so much to collectors. Mint marks are small letters stamped on coins to indicate which mint facility produced them. P or no mint mark for Philadelphia, D for Denver, and S for San Francisco. And these tiny letters might seem insignificant, but they can make a huge difference in value because production quantities, die quality, and error rates varied significantly between facilities. For the 1954 Wheat Penny, that little S mint mark below the date is your first indicator that you might have something interesting, and then you need to examine the coin carefully for any errors or unusual characteristics that could make it worth thousands or millions. The most valuable 1954 Wheat Pennies are those with major errors. Think about a coin struck on a silver dime planchet instead of copper. Imagine a dramatic off-center strike where half the design is missing and you can see blank planchet. Picture a doubled die so strong that you can see the doubling with your naked eye. Or consider a massive die break that creates a spectacular raised blob of metal across the coin's surface. These are the coins that make collectors' hearts race. These are the specimens that get featured in auction catalogs with estimates in the 6 or 7 figures. And these are the needles in the haystack that dedicated coin roll hunters and estate sale shoppers dream of finding. Here's a real scenario that could happen to you. You're at an estate sale. You spot a jar full of old pennies priced at $5. You buy it thinking maybe you'll find a few wheat pennies worth a couple bucks. You get home and start sorting through them. And there it is. A 1954 wheat penny that immediately looks different. Maybe the color is wrong, suggesting wrong planchet. Maybe there's obvious doubling. Maybe the strike is dramatically off-center. You get it authenticated and graded. And suddenly you're holding a coin worth more than the house the estate sale was held in. Stories like this aren't just fantasy. They happen in the numismatic world all the time because most people don't know what to look for, and valuable coins get overlooked and sold for pennies when they're worth fortunes. The authentication and grading process is absolutely crucial for high-value error coins because there are fakes and altered coins out there. And the only way to be certain you have a genuine error is to submit it to a reputable third-party grading service like PCGS or NGC, who will examine it under microscopes, verify its authenticity, assign it a grade based on condition, and seal it in a tamper-evident holder that protects it and provides confidence to future buyers. When we talk about a 1954 Wheat Penny being worth $183 million, we're talking about a coin that would need to be perfect in every way: the rarest error type, the highest grade, pristine surfaces, perfect eye appeal, strong strike, original luster, and ideally a famous pedigree, meaning it was owned by legendary collectors and featured in important publications or exhibitions. Now let's talk about specific things to look for when examining 1954 Wheat Pennies. Start with the mint mark itself and check if it appears repunched or doubled, which is itself a valuable variety. Then examine the entire date for any doubling or tripling of the numbers. Look at all the lettering for doubled impressions. Check the weight because copper should be 3.11 grams, and anything significantly different suggests wrong planchet. Examine the surfaces for die breaks, cracks, and cuts. Verify that the strike is properly centered, and assess the overall condition because uncirculated examples are worth dramatically more than circulated ones. The San Francisco Mint has a special place in numismatic history. It opened in 1854 during the California Gold Rush to convert gold from the mines into coins. It produced some of America's most famous and valuable rare coins, and even though it stopped making regular circulation coins in 1955, pennies with the S mint mark from the 1940s and 1950s remain highly collectible. The 1954 Wheat Penny represents the second to last year San Francisco produced wheat pennies because they would only make them one more year in 1955, and this fact adds to the nostalgia and collectability of these coins because they represent the end of an era. From an investment perspective, rare error coins from the 1950s have shown tremendous appreciation over the past few decades. Coins that sold for hundreds or thousands of dollars in the 1980s and 1990s are now worth hundreds of thousands or even millions, and the trajectory continues upward as more collectors enter the hobby, as the supply of high-grade specimens remains fixed. and as wealthy collectors compete to own the finest examples. But you don't need to be wealthy to find these coins. You just need to be willing to look, to educate yourself on what makes coins valuable, and to carefully examine every wheat penny that crosses your path. I cannot stress enough how important it is to develop a systematic approach to searching coins. Don't just glance at them. Really look at them under good lighting with magnification. Check their weight. Feel their surface. Look for anything that seems unusual or different. And when in doubt, get a second opinion from a knowledgeable dealer or submit questionable coins for professional grading. And remember, we still have more valuable wheat pennies to cover, including some years that might surprise you and some error types that you need to understand. So don't go anywhere, because the information coming up could be exactly what you need to identify a fortune sitting in your pocket. Next, 1951's Wheat Penny. Thank you for joining us today, because what you are about to hear might completely change the way you look at old pennies forever, especially if you have ever come across a small brown coin tucked away in a drawer, a jar, or an inherited collection. Because today we are diving deep into one of the most mysterious, controversial, and astonishing stories in American numismatics. The legend of the 1951's Lincoln Wheat Penny, a coin that on the surface appears ordinary, but under the right circumstances, with the right errors, mistakes, mint anomalies, and historical coincidences, has been rumored, speculated, and fiercely debated as having a potential valuation reaching an unbelievable $156 million. And while many people walk past these coins without a second glance, seasoned collectors know that some of the most valuable treasures ever discovered were once dismissed as pocket change. And this is why today's discussion is so important, because the 1951's Wheat Penny represents a perfect storm of scarcity, minting irregularities, metal composition anomalies, striking errors, and historical timing that has fueled decades of fascination, rumors, private sales whispers, and high-stakes collector interest. And to truly understand how a single cent could theoretically command a price that rivals priceless works of art, you must first understand the historical context in which this coin was born. The San Francisco Mint in 1951 was operating under post-World War II pressures, metal shortages, aging equipment, and intense production demands, all of which created an environment where mistakes were not just possible but inevitable. And unlike the Philadelphia Mint, which produced coins without mint marks, the San Francisco Mint marked its pennies with a small s beneath the date, instantly identifying the origin and making error attribution far more precise. And this is critical because collectors value traceability and provenance almost as much as rarity itself. And in 1951, the San Francisco Mint produced a comparatively low mintage of wheat since compared to other facilities, making any surviving examples with errors exponentially more desirable. But rarity alone does not create a $100 million coin. What elevates the 1951's Wheat Penny into legendary territory are the specific combinations of errors and anomalies that experts believe could exist in one or a few undiscovered specimens, starting with off-metal strikes, which are among the most coveted errors in all of coin collecting. Because in 1951 pennies were supposed to be struck on bronze planchets composed primarily of copper with small amounts of tin and zinc, yet during periods of metal experimentation and leftover wartime materials, there is a theoretical possibility that a small number of planchets made from alternative alloys or even transitional metals were accidentally fed into the presses, creating pennies with entirely different weights, colors, magnetic properties, and acoustic signatures. And an off-metal 1951's Wheat Penny struck on a silver alloy, steel, or experimental copper blend would instantly become one of the rarest coins in existence, especially if authenticated by multiple grading services. And then there are double die errors, which occur when the coin die itself receives multiple impressions at slightly different angles, causing visible doubling on the date, lettering, or Lincoln's portrait. And while double dies are known across many years, A strong double die obverse or reverse on a low mintage San Francisco issue from 1951 would be extraordinarily rare, and if combined with other errors such as repunched mint marks or die cracks, the value could rise exponentially. But perhaps the most tantalizing possibility involves wrong planchet errors involving foreign coin blanks or experimental U.S. planchets intended for other denominations, because during the mid-20th century, U.S. mints frequently produced coins for foreign governments, and planchets from these contracts sometimes became mixed into domestic production lines, meaning that a 1951's wheat penny could theoretically exist struck on a foreign coin blank of unusual composition, weight, and diameter, creating a one-of-a-kind artifact that defies normal classification. And when you add to this the possibility of a full blockage error, where a previously struck coin becomes stuck in the press and impresses its design onto a blank planchet, resulting in a mirror image reverse or obverse, the result is a coin so visually shocking and mechanically improbable that collectors would compete fiercely to own it. And then, there are mint mark anomalies specific to the San Francisco Mint, including repunched S-mint marks, misplaced mint marks, or even missing mint marks due to grease-filled dies, each of which tells a story of human error and mechanical failure frozen in copper. And while any one of these errors alone could elevate a coin into the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, it is the hypothetical convergence of multiple high-tier errors on a single specimen that fuels the $156 million valuation narrative. Because elite collectors are not simply buying metal, they are buying uniqueness, narrative power, and irreplaceability, and a 1951's wheat penny exhibiting an off-metal strike, double die features, mint mark anomalies, and pristine condition preservation would represent a numismatic singularity, something that cannot be replicated, something that exists outside normal valuation frameworks. And condition plays an equally critical role, because the difference between a circulated example and a mint state or proof-like specimen is astronomical. And while proof wheat pennies were not officially produced in 1951, there are rumors and unconfirmed reports of experimental strikes or presentation pieces created using polished dies and planchets, and if such a coin were to surface bearing the S-mint mark with mirror-like fields and sharp cameo contrast, it would instantly rewrite the history books, and this is where the $156 million figure becomes conceptually plausible, not as a standard market value, but as a private collector valuation driven by prestige, rivalry, and the desire to own the most extraordinary penny ever known, because at the highest levels of collecting, price is not dictated by guides or auctions alone, but by what one individual is willing to pay to secure absolute dominance in a field. And history has shown us time and again that when two or more ultra-wealthy collectors pursue a singular object, traditional valuation models collapse, and the object becomes priceless. And this is why the 1951's wheat penny continues to capture imaginations, because it exists at the intersection of documented minting chaos, theoretical possibilities, and the undeniable truth that many of the most valuable coins ever discovered were unknown for decades, hiding in collections, estates, or circulation until someone with the right knowledge looked closer, weighed it, tested it, examined it under magnification, and realized they were holding something that should not exist. And the idea that a simple penny could secretly be worth more than a mansion, a yacht, or a private jet is not just exciting, it is empowering, because it means that history, value, and fortune can sometimes be found in the smallest and most overlooked places. And as we continue exploring the errors, mysteries, and scenarios surrounding the 1951's wheat penny, you will begin to see how every tiny imperfection, every unintended strike, and every deviation from the norm adds another layer to its potential worth, turning a humble cent into one of the most talked about and speculated treasures in modern coin collecting history. Next, 1958 wheat penny. Everyday pocket change can turn into unbelievable treasure. Today we are diving deep into one of the most mysterious and talked about Lincoln wheat cents ever imagined. A coin that on the surface looks ordinary but beneath that familiar copper tone hides a storm of errors, minting mistakes, historical anomalies, and rare possibilities that have led collectors to whisper about values reaching an almost unbelievable $62 million. Yes, today, we are exploring the legendary 1958 Wheat Penny and how a combination of timing, mint technology, transitional chaos, human error, and extreme rarity could make a single small set one of the most valuable coins in existence. So settle in and imagine pulling a simple penny from your pocket and discovering it could change your life forever, because the story of this coin is not just about metal and mint marks, but about chance, history, and the fine line between ordinary and extraordinary. The year 1958 itself is already loaded with significance because it marks the final chapter of the Wheat Penny series, the last year before the Lincoln Memorial Reverse took over in 1959, making every 1958 wheat set part of a historic ending that collectors obsess over. And when you add the Denver Mint into the equation, you enter a world where production pressures were high, dies were pushed to their limits, and quality control sometimes took a back seat to output demands. The Denver Mint in 1958 was striking millions of cents using aging equipment and worn dies that had already seen heavy use, which opens the door for a wide range of dramatic errors that could transform a common coin into a legendary rarity. One of the most talked about possibilities behind the astronomical valuation of a 1958 Wheat Penny is the presence of a major double die error. And not the subtle kind that requires magnification, but the bold dramatic doubling that can be seen with the naked eye on Lincoln's date, lettering, motto, or even on the wheat ears themselves. Double dies occur during the hubbing process, when a die receives multiple misaligned impressions, and in the 1950s hubbing technology was still prone to such mistakes, especially when rushed or improperly aligned. A true double die from 1958 showing strong separation in the numbers of the date, or in the word liberty, or in God we trust, would already be worth a fortune. But if such doubling were extreme, and combined with other anomalies, it could push the coin into unprecedented territory. Another mind-bending possibility is a mule error involving the 1958 Wheat Penny. Mules are coins struck with mismatched obverse and reverse dies never intended to be paired together. Imagine a 1958 obverse paired with an experimental or incorrect reverse, or even a reverse from a different denomination or year. Such an error would represent a catastrophic breakdown in mint procedures, and would likely be unique or nearly unique, and uniqueness is one of the most powerful drivers of extreme coin values. Then, there is the tantalizing idea of a transitional metal error. While official composition changes for the cent occurred later, experimental planchets and leftover blanks sometimes remained in mint facilities. If a 1958 Wheat Penny were struck on a wrong metal planchet, such as steel, aluminum, brass alloy, or even a foreign planchet, it would defy expectations and ignite collector frenzy. Wrong planchet errors already command huge premiums, but when tied to the final year of the Wheat Cent series and the Denver Mint, the value potential skyrockets, especially if the coin were confirmed to be struck at the mint and not altered after leaving. Another factor driving the legendary valuation is the possibility of an off-metal proof or presentation strike, although proofs were officially produced at Philadelphia during this era. Special strikes and presentation pieces have been known to surface that blur the lines between circulation and proof. A 1958 Wheat Penny with proof-like surfaces, razor-sharp details, and mirrored fields could suggest a special strike or experimental issue never meant for public circulation, and if documentation or metallurgical testing supported such an origin, collectors and institutions would battle fiercely to own it, pushing prices into the stratosphere. Errors such as extreme off-center strikes also play a role. An off-center 1958 Wheat Penny showing a large percentage of blank planchet while retaining a full date and mint mark would already be valuable. But if combined with a broad strike, color error, or multiple strikes, it would represent a perfect storm of minting chaos. Imagine a coin struck once off-center, then struck again slightly rotated or misaligned, creating overlapping images and distorted wheat ears. Such dramatic visual errors are highly sought after and rarely survive because they were often caught and destroyed, which adds to their rarity. Another astonishing scenario involves a 1958 wheat penny struck through a foreign object, such as grease, wire, cloth, or metal fragments. Strike-through errors can leave deep impressions or missing details that tell a story frozen in copper, and when such an error is severe and well documented, it becomes a centerpiece of advanced collections. Now consider the possibility of a major die break or retained cut error, where part of the die breaks away and leaves a raised blob of metal on the coin. A massive cut covering part of Lincoln's portrait or the wheat stalks would instantly make the coin visually striking and historically significant, especially if the break worsened over time and only a handful of examples were struck before the die was retired. Adding to the intrigue is the potential for a wrong mint mark style or placement. The Denver mint mark on 1958 cents was hand-punched into the die, which means variations in size, shape, and position exist. But an anomalous mint mark, such as a double D, inverted D, or even a repunched mint mark with extreme separation could elevate the coin into legendary status, and in the most extraordinary hypothetical cases, collectors speculate about a missing mint mark on a Denver-struck coin or a D mint mark appearing where it should not, suggesting die swapping or experimental practices. One of the most dramatic possibilities that fuels the $62 million valuation is the idea of a 1958 wheat penny struck with a 1959 reverse or vice versa, creating a transitional error that crosses the boundary between two major design eras. Such a coin would represent the literal bridge between wheat cents and memorial cents, and if authenticated, it would become one of the most important Lincoln cents ever discovered. History also plays a powerful role in value. 1958 was a year of intense Cold War tension, rapid industrial output, and technological change. Mints were under pressure to meet demand efficiently, and in such environments, mistakes slip through. A coin that embodies these pressures and survives unnoticed for decades before emerging would capture the imagination of collectors worldwide. Condition is another crucial element. A 1958 wheat penny with extreme errors, but also preserved in near-perfect mint state condition, would be almost miraculous. Most error coins show heavy wear or damage, so a pristine example suggests it was set aside early, perhaps by a mint worker or sharp-eyed collector, and high-grade coins exponentially increase in value, especially when combined with rarity. The psychology of collectors cannot be ignored either. The final year of a beloved design carries emotional weight. Wheat pennies are iconic, nostalgic, and deeply ingrained in American culture, and owning the ultimate wheat penny error from the final year would be like owning the crown jewel of an entire series. Auction dynamics further amplify value. When two or more wealthy collectors or institutions decide they must have a particular coin, bidding wars can explode beyond rational limits, especially for a coin that is unique or nearly so. Records are meant to be broken, and a coin positioned as the most important wheat penny ever could easily shatter previous price ceilings. Another layer to this story involves the possibility of undiscovered varieties still hiding in collections, rolls, or estates. Many people underestimate pennies and store them away without inspection, and history has shown time and again that legendary coins often surface decades after they were minted, adding an aura of mystery and hope that fuels speculation. Even rumors of a single confirmed example can drive theoretical value sky high as collectors imagine what they would pay to secure it. Authentication and grading also play a critical role. A coin certified by top grading services with detailed attribution of multiple errors and an extraordinary grade would gain instant legitimacy and trust, opening the door to elite auctions and global attention. The media buzz surrounding a discovery like this would further inflate interest and value, as stories spread beyond numismatic circles into mainstream news, drawing in new buyers and investors. The $62 million figure represents not just metal but mythology, a perfect convergence of rarity, error, condition, history, and desire. And while most 1958 wheat pennies are worth only a few cents or dollars, the existence of even one coin that defies the norm reminds us why people search their change and why. Numismatics remains endlessly fascinating. The possibilities we have explored are rooted in real minting processes and documented errors, but taken together in a single coin, they create something almost mythical, a once-in-a-lifetime artifact that could stand alongside the most famous coins ever known. So the next time you see a humble wheat penny, remember that behind that small copper disc could be a story worth millions. And the 1958 wheat penny stands as a symbol of how history, error, and chance can transform the ordinary into the extraordinary, inspiring collectors to keep searching, learning, and dreaming, because somewhere out there the next legendary coin could still be waiting to be discovered. Next, 1945 wheat penny. A huge warm welcome to all the new viewers joining the channel today. This is the place where everyday pocket change turns into unbelievable hidden treasure stories, where ordinary coins reveal extraordinary secrets, and where knowledge can literally change your life. Because today, we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating and mysterious Lincoln wheat cents ever discussed, the legendary 1945 wheat penny. A coin that many people have spit without a second thought, a coin that looks common at first glance, yet under the right circumstances, with the right combination of rare errors, minting mistakes, historical anomalies, metal irregularities, and preservation miracles, has been whispered in collector circles to reach a jaw-dropping value of up to $31 million. And while that number sounds impossible to most people, the real magic lies in understanding how such a valuation could even exist, what exact errors and conditions would need to align, and why the 1945 wheat penny is one of the most intriguing candidates for such extreme numismatic potential. Because 1945 was not just another year in American history, it was the final year of World War II, a year of massive industrial pressure on U.S. mints, a year when speed mattered more than perfection, a year when millions upon millions of coins were struck under stressful conditions that created the perfect environment for mistakes to slip through, mistakes that today can transform a simple copper cent into a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. And to understand how a 1945 wheat penny could theoretically command a $31 million price tag, we must begin by appreciating the sheer scale of production, because over 1 billion Lincoln cents were struck in 1945 across the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints, making the date itself extremely common. But here is where most people make the fatal mistake of assuming common date means common value. Because in numismatics, rarity is not only about the date, it is about the combination of date, mint, metal, strike quality, die condition, error type, and survival rate. And in 1945 all of these factors collide in ways that are almost unmatched, starting with the metal composition, because during World War II the U.S. Mint famously experimented with different metals to conserve copper for wartime use, leading to the 1943 steel cent. And although by 1944 and 1945 the mint had returned to copper alloy cents using recycled shell casings, the metal supply chain was still chaotic, and that chaos opens the door to one of the most valuable possibilities of all, off-metal errors. Because if a 1945 wheat penny were struck on a planchet intended for another denomination, such as a silver dime planchet, a brass foreign coin blank, or even a leftover steel planchet from 1943 that somehow survived undetected into 1945 production, the value would immediately skyrocket, especially if authenticated, because off-metal errors are among the most sought-after mint mistakes in existence, and a confirmed 1945 steel wheat cent would be a numismatic sensation beyond belief, potentially surpassing even the legendary 1943 bronze cent in rarity. Because while a few 1943 bronze cents are known, a genuine 1945 steel cent would represent a reverse transitional anomaly that should not exist, and coins that should not exist are exactly what collectors pay millions for. But the metal is only the beginning, because die errors play an equally crucial role, and during 1945 many dies were pushed far beyond their intended lifespan, resulting in dramatic double dies, die breaks, cuds, retained cuds, die clashes, and massive die deterioration. Doubling that can completely transform the appearance of a coin, and a true dramatic double die obverse from 1945 with strong doubling on the date, the word liberty, and the motto "In God We Trust" would be an elite rarity, especially if the doubling is bold and separated rather than flat or mechanical, because collectors pay premiums for a visible doubling that can be clearly identified without magnification. And when such an error appears on a historically significant date like 1945, the desirability multiplies, but the story goes even deeper, because strike anomalies also matter, and in 1945 rushed production meant misaligned dies, off-center strikes, broad strikes without collars, and even double-struck coins occurred, and while minor off-center errors are common and relatively affordable, extreme off-center strikes that still show the full date and mint mark can be worth enormous sums, especially when combined with other errors. And imagine a 1945 wheat penny struck off center, double struck, on the wrong planchet, with a dramatic double die, because error stacking is where values explode, as collectors are not just paying for one anomaly but for a perfect storm of mint chaos frozen into a single piece of copper history. And then there is the question of mint marks, because while Philadelphia cents carry no mint mark, Denver and San Francisco coins add another layer of entry, particularly when mint marks themselves are repunched, overpunched, or missing, entirely due to grease-filled dies. And a 1945D or 1945S wheat penny with a dramatic repunched mint mark could become a key variety if the repunching is strong and well documented. But even more exciting is the possibility of a mint mark style anomaly, because mint marks in the 1940s were hand punched into dies, meaning variation was inevitable, and any previously undocumented mint mark position or shape could instantly become a discovery coin, sending shockwaves through the numismatic community. But beyond errors, condition is king, and this is where the $31 million valuation truly begins to make theoretical sense, because while billions of 1945 cents were struck, only a microscopic fraction survived in perfect condition, and a flawless 1945 wheat penny graded at the absolute top of the scale with full original mint red color, blazing luster, razor-sharp strike, and zero post-mint damage would already be worth a substantial sum even without errors. But when you combine pristine condition with a major error or unique anomaly, the value enters a completely different universe, because elite collectors are not just buying a coin, they are buying the best-known example, the finest surviving artifact, the crown jewel of a series, and these collectors often compete fiercely, driving prices far beyond what seems rational to outsiders. And then there is the historical narrative, because 1945 represents the end of a global conflict, the return of peace, and the transition of American industry back to civilian life, and coins from this period carry emotional and symbolic weight that cannot be replicated, making them more than metal, making them tangible witnesses to history. And when a coin from such a moment also happens to be unique or nearly unique due to errors, it becomes priceless in the eyes of the right buyer. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the $31 million possibility lies in undiscovered varieties, because even today, new die varieties are still being found, and it is entirely possible that a one-of-a-kind 1945 wheat penny exists in a jar, a drawer, or an old collection, displaying an error so extreme and so unique that it defies existing classifications, and such a coin would not be compared to others. It would stand alone, allowing the market to define its value from scratch. And when uniqueness meets demand, there is no ceiling, because auction records are broken when something appears that has never been seen before, and history has shown time and time again that numismatic miracles do happen, as with the discovery of the 1943 bronze cent, the 1955 double die cent, and other legendary coins that were once dismissed as myths and beyond errors and condition. Provenance can also play a role, because a coin with documented history, such as being part of a famous collection or discovered in a historically significant hoard, can command premiums that far exceed expectations, especially if the story captures public imagination. And imagine the headline impact of a 1945 wheat penny discovered decades later, authenticated as a one-of-a-kind error from the final days of World War II production, because that story alone would elevate the coin into mainstream media attention, drawing interest not only from collectors, but from museums, investors, and institutions. And when multiple types of buyers compete, prices escalate rapidly. And then there is the psychological factor, because rarity fuels desire, and desire fuels value, and a coin rumored or proven to be unique becomes an object of obsession, with collectors willing to stretch beyond conventional limits to secure ownership. And $31 million, while shocking, is not unprecedented in the world of ultra-rare collectibles when you consider art, stamps, and historical artifacts. And coins have increasingly joined that elite category, especially when they combine rarity, condition, history, and mystery. And the 1945 wheat penny sits at the intersection of all these elements, making it a perfect canvas for extreme valuation scenarios. But it is also important to understand that not every 1945 wheat penny is valuable, because most are worth only a few cents to a few dollars depending on condition. And the million-dollar stories represent the absolute pinnacle, the rarest of the rare, the outliers that redefine expectations. And this is why education is so powerful, because knowing what to look for, understanding errors, recognizing anomalies, and preserving coins properly can mean the difference between spending a fortune unknowingly and uncovering a life-changing discovery. And this is why so many collectors examine every wheat penny they find, because history has proven that incredible treasures often hide in plain sight, and even if the odds are slim, the possibility remains. And that possibility is what makes coin collecting endlessly exciting, endlessly hopeful, and endlessly rewarding, because every coin has a story, but some stories are worth millions. And as we reflect on the 1945 wheat penny and its astonishing $31 million potential under the most extraordinary circumstances, remember that this is not about hype, it is about understanding how value is created in numismatics through rarity, error, condition, and history, and how the smallest details can produce the biggest results. And if you have enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most fascinating coins ever discussed, make sure you stay curious, keep searching your change, and stay connected with the channel, because the next incredible discovery could be closer than you think, and sometimes all it takes is one penny to change everything. Next, 1958 wheat penny. Everyday pocket change turns into mind-blowing treasure stories, and where ordinary-looking coins hide extraordinary secrets. Today we are diving deep into one of the most mysterious and talked about Lincoln wheat cents ever imagined, a coin that on the surface looks just like countless others minted in the late 1950s, but beneath that familiar copper tone lies a combination of rare errors, production mistakes, historical timing, and collector psychology that has pushed its legendary valuation into the realm of $14 million. Yes, we are talking about the 1958 wheat penny, a coin that officially should not even exist in the way many collectors dream about it, and that is exactly where its unbelievable value story begins, because when you understand how the United States Mint operated in 1958, when you understand the transition pressures from wheat reverse to the Lincoln Memorial design, when you understand how dies were prepared, hubbed, repunched, polished, overused, mismatched, and sometimes accidentally combined in ways never intended for circulation, you begin to see how a single cent could theoretically become one of the most valuable copper coins ever conceived. The 1958 year is especially important because it was the final year of the wheat reverse, ending a design that had been in use since 1909. And during the year the Denver Mint was producing massive quantities of cents under tight schedules, worn equipment, and constant design transition. Preparations, which created the perfect storm for minting anomalies. One of the most powerful drivers of the imagined $14 million valuation is the idea of 1958 Wheat Pennies struck with an experimental or transitional reverse error, because in reality most 1958 cents were already being prepared alongside dies for the upcoming 1959 Lincoln Memorial cents, and any accidental use of the wrong reverse hub, wrong die pairing, or mule configuration would have created an instant numismatic legend. Collectors have long speculated about the possibility of a 1958 cent struck with a wheat reverse, but showing early memorial design elements, or the opposite. A memorial reverse paired with a wheat obverse date, and while such pieces are extraordinarily controversial, the mere theoretical existence of one pushes collectors into a frenzy because transitional errors represent moments when history itself misfired. Another major value driver comes from double die errors, especially on the obverse, where the date, liberty, and "in God we trust" could show dramatic separation. Not the flat machine doubling seen on Common Sense, but true hub doubling caused by misalignment during the hubbing process, and because 1958 was a high-pressure production year with older hubbing techniques still in use, the chances of strong double dies slipping through quality control were significantly higher than in later years. A 1958 double die obverse wheat cent with extreme spread on the date and lettering would already command huge value. But when combined with pristine condition and original red surfaces, its valuation escalates exponentially. Another factor that feeds into the $14 million narrative is die pairing rarity, because some dies were only used briefly before being retired due to cracks, clashes, or other defects, and if a particular die pair produced only a handful of coins before being destroyed, the survival rate would be microscopic. Collectors value rarity above almost everything else, and when rarity is combined with dramatic visual errors, the price ceiling becomes almost meaningless. Die cracks themselves are another key component, especially retained cut breaks or interior die breaks that create raised blobs or missing design elements. A 1958 wheat penny with a massive retained cut running through the wheat ears or across Lincoln's portrait would instantly be categorized as a major error rather than a minor variety, and such coins often become unique or nearly unique survivors. Adding to the mystique is the possibility of wrong planchet errors. During the late 1950s, the mint handled planchets for multiple denominations and experimental compositions, and while copper was still standard for cents, mistakes did happen. A 1958 wheat penny struck on a bronze alloy intended for a different denomination, or on an off-metal experimental blank, would immediately enter legendary status, and if such a coin also displayed additional errors, like doubling or misalignment, the stacking of errors would push it into an entirely different valuation universe. Off-center strikes are another category that plays into this story, because while many off-center cents exist, extreme off-centers that still show a full date and mint mark are far rarer, and if a 1958 wheat penny were struck dramatically off-center while retaining full design clarity and mint mark visibility, collectors would pay enormous premiums, especially if the coin also showed broad strike characteristics or collar errors. The Denver mint mark itself adds another layer of intrigue, because the placement of the D was done by hand punching at that time, which means repunched mint marks are possible. A 1958 wheat penny with a bold RPM showing clear separation or rotation would already be highly collectible, but when combined with other errors such as doubling or die cracks, it becomes something far beyond an ordinary variety. Planchet defects such as lamination errors also contribute to the valuation mythology, because copper alloy inconsistencies could cause layers of metal to peel or flake away, revealing dramatic textures and shapes. A large, well-defined lamination on a high-grade 1958 wheat penny would be visually stunning and extremely rare, especially if it occurred in a way that did not compromise the date or mint mark. Strike-through errors are another fascinating aspect, where foreign materials such as grease, cloth fibers, or metal shavings became trapped between the die and planchet, creating missing or distorted design elements. A 1958 wheat penny with a dramatic strike-through that altered Lincoln's portrait or the wheat stalks could become a one-of-a-kind artifact. The concept of die clashes also plays into the valuation story. When obverse and reverse dies struck each other without a planchet in between, transferring elements of one side onto the other, a strong clash on a 1958 wheat penny could leave ghostly outlines of wheat ears on Lincoln's face or traces of Lincoln's profile within the reverse design. Such dramatic clashes are prized by advanced collectors. Another element fueling the $14 million idea is condition rarity. Because even common coins become extraordinary when preserved in near-perfect state, a 1958 wheat penny graded at the highest levels with full original mint red color, no carbon spots, no wear, and sharp strike would already be a condition census coin. And when you combine that with any major error or variety, the valuation multiplies rapidly. Collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying history, scarcity, and the thrill of owning something almost no one else can ever have. The psychology of the market cannot be ignored either, because once a coin becomes known as legendary, bidding wars can erupt. Wealthy collectors and institutions compete not just to own the coin, but to cement their legacy within the numismatic world. Auction records have shown time and again that when two determined bidders want the same unique piece, prices can soar far beyond traditional guides. Another factor is the narrative itself, the story of a final year wheat cent, minted in Denver, carrying a combination of errors that should never have happened, surviving against all odds, and emerging decades later from a roll, collection, or estate. That story adds emotional value that cannot be quantified, and emotional value often drives the highest prices. The historical context of 1958 America also adds depth. This was a time of industrial acceleration, Cold War tension, and massive coin demand. The mint was under pressure to produce billions of coins, and quality control sometimes took a back seat to volume, creating fertile ground for mistakes. Each mistake tells a story of human error, mechanical limitation, and transitional chaos. And collectors are drawn to those stories because they humanize the minting process. Another speculative but powerful value driver is the possibility of undocumented prototype strikes. While officially denied, rumors persist that experimental dies or planchets were tested at various mints during transitional years. If a 1958 wheat penny were proven to be an experimental strike using modified dies or alloys, its value would be virtually limitless. Authentication would be complex and controversial. But controversy itself often increases desirability. The role of third-party grading cannot be overstated either, because once a coin is encapsulated by a respected grading service and labeled with its errors and varieties, it gains legitimacy in the marketplace. A slab 1958 wheat penny described as unique, finest known, or only confirmed example would instantly become a trophy coin. The copper color spectrum also matters, with full red specimens commanding far more than red-brown or brown examples. Original luster is like a fingerprint of history, untouched since the moment of striking, and collectors pay enormous premiums for that untouched look. The idea of a $14 million valuation also reflects the cumulative effect of stacking multiple rare attributes into a single coin. Not just one error but several. Not just rarity but extreme condition. Not just historical context but emotional storytelling, all converging into one object. Even the survival mystery adds to the allure. Because how many such coins could have been melted, spent, or damaged over the decades? The few that remain become symbols of chance and discovery, fueling dreams of finding treasure in old jars or inherited collections. This dream aspect is crucial because it keeps the hobby alive and expanding. People hunt through wheat cents not just for modest gains, but for the possibility of life-changing finds. The 1958 wheat penny embodies the dream more than almost any other. It represents the end of an era, the imperfections of mass production, and the extraordinary outcomes that can arise from simple mistakes. Even skeptics who question the realistic possibility of a $14 million sale cannot deny the power of such a narrative to captivate collectors, and in numismatics, perception often becomes reality over time. As myths become legends and legends become benchmarks for value, the idea of such a coin also pushes research forward, encouraging collectors to study dies, varieties, and mint history more deeply. Every discovered repunched mint mark, double die, or unusual strike brings us closer to understanding the full scope of what might exist, and even if the ultimate $14,001,958 Wheat penny remains elusive or hypothetical, the pursuit itself adds value to the hobby, because it inspires learning, preservation, and appreciation of history, and that is why this coin, whether viewed as a real attainable treasure or an ultimate symbol of numismatic possibility, continues to dominate conversations, listings, and imaginations, reminding us that even the smallest denomination can carry the biggest stories, and that somewhere out there, perhaps still undiscovered, could be a 1958 Wheat penny whose errors, mistakes, and improbable survival combine to create a value that rewrites what we think a single cent can be worth. Last 1944 Wheat penny. A warm greeting to all the passionate collectors, history lovers, and treasure hunters tuning in today to the channel. This is the place where everyday pocket change transforms into extraordinary stories of fortune and mystery. And in today's deep dive, we are exploring one of the most talked about and legendary coins in American numismatics, the 1944 Wheat penny. A coin that on the surface looks ordinary, but under the right circumstances has been rumored, speculated, and passionately discussed as being worth as much as $13 million because of rare errors, incredible minting mistakes, and once-in-a-lifetime possibilities that can turn a simple copper cent into a life-changing discovery. So settle in, imagine the thrill of finding history in your hands. And let's take a long journey into why this humble wartime penny has captured the imagination of collectors worldwide, and why some versions are considered among the most valuable coins ever conceived, beginning with the historical backdrop of 1944, when the United States was deep in World War II and copper was a critical strategic metal used for ammunition and military equipment, which is why in 1943 the U.S. Mint famously switched from copper to zinc-coated steel for penny production. Yet in 1944 the Mint returned to using copper alloy derived largely from recycled shell casings from the battlefield, creating a unique alloy composition that already set the stage for variation, scarcity, and intrigue, because anytime recycled metals are involved, inconsistencies can occur, and inconsistencies are the birthplace of numismatic legends. The standard 1944 Wheat penny was supposed to be struck on a copper planchet composed of roughly 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin, and hundreds of millions were produced across Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, making the normal examples quite common. But what elevates this coin into the realm of multi-million-dollar discussion are the extraordinary deviations from that standard, the mistakes that should never have happened, yet somehow did, slipping through quality control during one of the most chaotic production periods in mint history. One of the most famous and valuable possibilities is the 1944 steel Wheat penny, an error that occurred when leftover steel planchets from 1943 were accidentally fed into the presses in 1944, resulting in pennies dated 1944, but struck on steel instead of copper. And while only a tiny handful of these are confirmed to exist, their rarity is so extreme that even well-circulated examples have sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in pristine condition, they are believed by some experts and high-end collectors to be worth well into the millions, especially when combined with perfect surfaces, strong strikes, and ironclad provenance. And this is where the $13 million valuation enters the conversation. Because in elite numismatic circles, price is not just determined by metal or age but by desire, competition, and the story behind the coin. And when a coin represents a documented mint error from a wartime transition year with virtually no surviving population, bidding wars can push values into astronomical territory, especially in private sales that never make headlines. Another critical factor that fuels the value of the 1944 wheat penny is the mint mark. As a 1944 steel penny from Denver or San Francisco would be even rarer than one from Philadelphia due to lower production numbers and stricter material controls at branch mints, meaning the theoretical existence of a 1944D or 1944S steel penny in flawless condition could easily justify a price tag in the 8-figure range, not because such sales happen every day, but because the combination of rarity, condition, historical context, and collector obsession creates a perfect storm where price ceilings become irrelevant. Beyond steel planchets, there are other dramatic errors that elevate certain 1944 wheat pennies into the realm of elite collectibles, including off-metal strikes where the coin was accidentally struck on a foreign planchet or experimental alloy, resulting in unusual weight, color, and magnetic properties, and these off-metal errors are often one-of-a-kind or limited to just a few known examples, making them irresistible to advanced collectors who seek uniqueness above all else. Then, there are double die obverse and reverse errors, where the design elements such as the date, lettering, or Lincoln's portrait appear double due to misalignment during the die creation process, and while many double dies are minor and add modest premiums, dramatic and well-defined doubling on a 1944 wheat penny can multiply its value exponentially, especially when combined with other anomalies like repunched mint marks or die cracks that tell a story of a die pushed beyond its limits during intense wartime production demands. Another powerful contributor to extreme value is condition rarity, because while millions of 1944 wheat pennies exist, almost none survive in absolute gem condition with full original luster, razor-sharp details, and no signs of wear or environmental damage. And when you factor in that most coins from this era circulated heavily during the war and post-war years, finding one that looks as though it was struck yesterday becomes extraordinarily difficult, and condition is everything at the top end of the market, where a single point difference on a grading scale can mean millions of dollars. Collectors chasing registry set perfection are willing to pay almost any price to secure the finest known example. And if a 1944 era penny were to surface in such a state, its value could shatter expectations. Adding further fuel to the $13 million narrative, the alloy itself also plays a role in valuation, as the recycled shell casing copper used in 1944 can vary subtly in composition, and some coins exhibit distinctive coloration or toning that is both beautiful and historically meaningful, reminding collectors that the metal once served a wartime purpose before becoming currency. And coins with unique, natural toning patterns often command premiums far beyond their technical grade because they are visually striking and impossible to replicate. Another layer of intrigue comes from transitional errors, where planchets from different years or compositions were accidentally mixed. And while the 1943 steel to 1944 copper transition is the most famous, there are also rumors and unconfirmed reports of experimental alloys being tested during this period. And if a 1944 wheat penny were conclusively proven to be struck on such an experimental planchet, its value would be virtually impossible to predict, as collectors would be bidding not just on a coin, but on a missing piece of mint history. Provenance and authentication are also critical in understanding how values can reach such staggering heights, because a coin rumored to be worth millions must be backed by impeccable documentation, expert grading, and scientific analysis. And when a coin is certified by top grading services and accompanied by metallurgical testing that confirms its error status, it transforms from a curiosity into a verified artifact, and verified artifacts with compelling stories attract institutional buyers, museums, and ultra-high net worth individuals who view such pieces as alternative investments comparable to fine art or rare gemstones. And in those circles, a $13 million price tag is not unthinkable, if the coin represents the finest or only example of its kind. The psychology of collecting also cannot be ignored, because numismatics at the highest level is driven by emotion as much as logic, the thrill of owning something no one else can own, the prestige of being associated with a legendary coin, and the satisfaction of preserving a tangible piece of history all contribute to prices that defy conventional valuation models. And the 1944 wheat penny, with its wartime origins, dramatic material shifts, and legendary era possibilities, checks every box that elite collectors crave. Even myths and rumors play a role in shaping value perceptions, as stories of pennies found in old coffee cans, inherited collections, or forgotten drawers continue to circulate, inspiring people to search their change and dream of discovery. And while many of these stories are exaggerated or misunderstood, they keep demand alive and maintain the aura of mystery that surrounds coins like the 1944 wheat penny, and demand is a powerful force in any market, especially one driven by scarcity. Another important aspect is the role of private sales, because not all record-breaking coin transactions are publicized, and some of the highest prices ever paid for rare coins occur quietly between collectors, dealers, and investors who prefer discretion, meaning it is entirely possible that a 1944-era penny has changed hands for a sum approaching 8 figures without ever making headlines, further fueling speculation and excitement within the community. And as more wealth flows into alternative assets, rare coins are increasingly viewed as stores of value that combine historical significance with tangible scarcity, positioning legendary pieces like the 1944 wheat penny as blue-chip collectibles. The possibility element is perhaps the most compelling aspect of this coin story, because unlike many ultra-rare coins locked away in museums, the 1944 wheat penny was produced in vast numbers and circulated widely, meaning there is always the tantalizing chance that an undiscovered era remains out there, tucked away in an old collection or forgotten jar, and that possibility keeps collectors searching and dreaming, knowing that the next incredible find could rewrite price guides and headlines overnight. And while not every 1944 wheat penny is worth a fortune, the knowledge that some could be worth millions transforms the way people look at these small copper discs, turning everyday change into potential treasure. And that is the true magic of numismatics, where history, chance, and human passion intersect. So as we reflect on why the 1944 wheat penny has been associated with values as high as $13 million, it becomes clear that it is not about a single factor, but a convergence of errors, mistakes, historical context, rarity, condition, provenance, and collector psychology, all woven together into a narrative that continues to captivate and inspire, reminding us that sometimes the most extraordinary stories are hidden in the most ordinary places, and that the next legendary coin discovery could be waiting just one handful of change away.